I just want to make it clear a couple things. Number one, KJ Adams is and can be a valuable player for this team. And I think if Kansas does want to reach their goals, which is obviously a Big 12 title and a deep run of the NCAA tournament, KJ is going to have a role in that. I just think Bill Self maybe needs to take a step back and really reevaluate that because KJ Adams is, in my opinion, he is the absolute perfect, ready-built sixth man. I mean, that's what I view, right? And that sixth man playing 15 to 20 minutes versus 25 to 30 minutes could make a big difference for this Kansas team offensively. So I think he definitely has a role, but certainly there needs to be really a reevaluation there. And
thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Pay all who enter and beware of this podcast. Yeah, I'm a little bit down, obviously, because we are recording this directly after Kansas opens conference play with its first loss in, 33 years, I think? First loss in 33 years to open conference play.
Yeah, I think friend of the show, Adam Sullivan, actually said it was their first conference opener lost in Lawrence since like the 60s against Colorado.
Yeah, since like the Cold War, folks. The early Cold War. Okay, not like 1980s Cold War, like the start of the Cold War. Yeah, so I'm Nick Springer. He's Kevin Flaherty. We're obviously going to be talking about that and plenty more here on today's show. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible, member FDIC. If you are watching us on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, drop a comment. I'm sure you have lots of thoughts. We'd love to hear from you in the YouTube comments. If you're listening on the audio platform, you can also leave us a rating, 5-star rating and review. That helps us spread the show as well. So thanks so much for tuning in. Obviously, this is going to be probably about a 45-minute to hour-long event session, I think, for the most part, because we're both, I think, pretty frustrated with how things unfolded for Kansas on New Year's Eve against West Virginia. Kevin, you had some of this talk ahead of the game. Oh, great week of practice. AJ Storr's been one of the best players in practice that we've seen from Bill Self. And then the game tips off. And sort of a microcosm maybe of what was to unfold over the next 40 minutes. The game tips off. KJ Adams gets the ball and has it instantly swatted away by West Virginia. And they end up, starting the game on a 7-0 run or whatever. And things spiraled from there. So I don't know. Where do you want to start with this thing? Kansas loses 62-61, had chances late. They fought back. Where do you want to kind of start with unpacking this game?
Obviously, it wound up being a single possession game at the end, but so similar to the Missouri game, right? And you come out and your energy level isn't what it should be. You're not strong with the ball. You're not getting the right shots. The other team is playing with more intensity. And in both of those games, Nick, sometimes you're able to overcome that, right? Like sometimes you come back, it's a close game, you wind up winning that game. How many times have we seen that in Allen Fieldhouse over the years where they find a way to kind of kick away a bad start and wind up winning that thing? The saying goes, the best way to win a close game is to not play a close game. And I think that in both the Missouri game and this game, what you did early on meant that you had to be almost perfect down the stretch. And against Missouri, you wind up with a Mark Mitchell, line drive 3-pointer that goes in. You miss a shot here and there, it gets away from you. In this one, you have an awful Doug Sermon's call on a Zeke Mayo saved basketball that felt huge in the moment. You have David Coit steal the ball, get it to KJ Adams for a lay-in. He misses that. You have a Flory Badunga sort of ill-advised leaving his feet in that situation. It's tough when you have a freshman out there in that sort of situation when he typically hasn't been out there in that sort of situation, Nick. And I think the other part, obviously, is the final possession. But the point is just you take care of your business early, Nick, and Kansas isn't in a position where people are now arguing about whose fault it was. Was it the ref's fault? Did they not call a foul here? Was it KJ Adams' fault? Was it Flory's fault? you're not in that situation. You're enjoying your first Big 12 win of the season, another win at Allen Fieldhouse, if Kansas comes out better than it did.
Yeah, and look, you didn't even mention the Javon Small, like, falling down, like, bumbling, idiotic, insane baseline shot that was, like, behind the backboard and somehow goes in, which happened right after the Zeke Mayo play. That was the next possession after Zeke Mayo was called for the over and back. So, yeah, man, I think we need to start with the elephant in the room, which is KJ Adams. I think he's sort of been the lightning rod.
Yeah.
Not even in this game, but really sort of over the past, since the season started, and his play. And early on in the game, it was pretty clear that West Virginia had a strategy of how they were going to defend him, aka not defend him, basically within anywhere beyond 5 feet from the basket, and that really caused a lot of troubles for Kansas offensively in the first half. And look, I think with KJ Adams, it's become increasingly difficult to justify him playing major minutes because when you look at some of the positive things that he can do, right, and he does do a lot of positive things. He's a great energy player. He's a great spark plug type guy. He's an incredible athlete, right? Probably the most athletic guy on the floor in most situations. But when you look at how Kansas operates offensively in the lineup they started with with KJ on the floor, it just that completely outweighs the positives that KJ can bring. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work for Kansas. And in the second half, you saw Bill Self go to Floyd Badunga, and things opened up a little bit more, and Kansas had a little bit more success. But yeah, I just want to make it clear a couple things. Number one, KJ Adams is and can be a valuable player for this team, and I think if Kansas does want to reach their goals, which is obviously a Big 12 title and a deep run of the NCAA tournament, KJ is going to have a role in that. I just think Bill Self maybe needs to take a step back and really reevaluate that because KJ Adams is, in my opinion, he is the absolute perfect, ready-built sixth man. I mean, that's what I view, right? And that sixth man playing 15 to 20 minutes versus 25 to 30 minutes could make a big difference for this Kansas team offensively. So I think he definitely has a role, but certainly there needs to be really a reevaluation there. And I really hate how hard fans are coming down on him because I think, he's obviously been through a lot, and Bill Self obviously cares about him very much. I'm talking even just personally, right? I'm just talking off the floor also for KJ as well. So, I hate that the fans go after him like that, but I think from Bill Self's perspective, like if he does want, no matter how much he loves KJ Adams, which I'm sure he does very much, if he wants this Kansas team to possibly be its best, I think it means taking KJ's role and adjusting it and, allowing some freeing up of other guys. And look, we can talk about it. I also want to make something else clear is that Kansas being down 13 at the half and only scoring 20 points in the first half, KJ Adams was a part of that, but that was not the sole reason why KU struggled, right? I mean, they had many other issues in the first half that were contributing to that struggling. But yeah, I think with KJ, that it's pretty clear at this point that there needs to be a reevaluation of how to utilize him, because I think right now the way he's being utilized is probably limiting his own effectiveness, but I think from a big picture is certainly limiting the overall effectiveness of guys like Hunter Dickinson, guys like DeJuan Harris, AJ Storr, and so on and so forth. So there's got to be a better way to deploy him, I think, that can both benefit him as a player individually and also the team as well.
Yeah, with 18 to 22-year-olds and with, the COVID years and stuff, 18 to 30-year-olds, it feels like confidence is such a huge thing, Nick. Like, and people, they want to focus on skill and all these things, and I get it. A lot of times confidence, if a player is confident, he can overcome a lot, and you can tell a difference between the way a guy plays when he's being tentative and when he's really getting after it. When a guy is playing 5 feet off of you, Nick, and you just kind of pass the ball, you're letting that guy play 5 feet off of you, right? Like, you're not attacking him and saying, hey, you're giving me a runway to start getting toward the basket and do different things. You're playing into what they want you to do. And when you take a 15-footer, because the guy's giving you a 15-footer, you're playing into what they want you to do. Also, West Virginia entered this game as a team that really struggled to keep people off the offensive glass. And I think you saw that in the second half. KJ Adams played 28 minutes and didn't have an offensive rebound. He made one field goal, and generally speaking, was pretty passive. I thought he had one rebound overall in 28 minutes, and so I get how the next question from a lot of fans is, well, if you're getting on AJ Storr or somebody like that for not rebounding, and then KJ Adams is not rebound, make this make sense, basically. And I thought it was interesting to your point about, AJ Storr, and Storr struggled obviously early. He was really tentative. I thought it said a lot that when Kansas made its run, not only was KJ Adams off the court, but Kansas didn't go to AJ Storr either. It was a too big lineup with Flory Badunga out there, and Kansas was able to get on the glass. The defense got a lot better, and so it was interesting that they decided to make that shift. Another part of that first half, honestly, Nick, Hunter Dickinson with his defensive limitations, especially when you have him high hedging, when I've thought for a while, we've talked about on the show, Hunter should maybe be playing more drop, something that, where he could basically be a big body in the lane and a deterrent without having to cover that ground from the perimeter and get back in time. You can still have him out there when he's performing offensively. And Hunter in the first half was, I think, 1 for 5. He had just an awful turnover at the top of the key where he just, caught the ball and took.
Oh, yeah. That travel was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just concentration, turning the ball over like that. And so when Hunter Dickinson is having a poor offensive half like that, generally speaking, Nick, Kansas is probably going to be having a poor offensive half. And when you look at, again, the defensive limitations, Kansas needs Hunter Dickinson to not have halves like that because he needs to score and create points to really provide value to this team. And so I think that was another part of it. Like you said, it was a multifaceted thing. And I think, early on in particular, weren't shooting the ball well, but also, Nick, they weren't attacking the basket either. And you kind of need to do, and it's great if you could do both, right? That's the offense you want. But if you're not doing one, you have to do the other. Like if you're not getting to the rim, you need to make outside shots. If you're not making outside shots, you need to get to the rim and by proxy get to the free throw line. I thought one of the things Kansas did so much better in the second half when you saw that comeback was Kansas really got its head down and attacked into the paint. Even then, though, Nick, it wasn't, and AJ wasn't in the game, so I'm not blaming him, but it wasn't guys like AJ Storr or KJ Adams that you would maybe expect that from, right? The attacking the basket was coming from DeJuan Harris. It was coming from Zeke Mayo. And so if they can get, those wings / small ball fours to start getting downhill and getting to the free throw line, I think that could start to unlock some things as well.
Yeah, I think the key word you utilized there, Kevin, was passive.
Yeah,
I think there's some individuals on this team, and you highlighted it with AJ Storr and even KJ Adams. I think in this game particularly, just not aggressive enough, right? Just don't seem to have that aggressiveness in them, that confidence to go and make those types of shots or make those types of plays. That's what I think was really missing in some cases. Now, on the flip side, you did see that aggressiveness from other guys. I mean, Flory Badunga, again, was phenomenal. He seems like he's going to be a budding star. The issue with what happened in this game, Kevin, though, is that something that happened in this game, in the second half especially, it's not going to be something Kansas can rely on consistently. And that is the lineup of Flory Badunga and Hunter Dickinson on the floor at the same time.
Yeah,
that's just not a lineup that you can realistically run with very much longer than maybe like 5 to 10 minutes a game. Because guess what? Hunter Dickinson's backup is Flory Badunga. And if they're both on the floor, that's that becomes your issue, right? Unless you want to bring Zach Clements in, Zach Clements, I think, was dealing with an injury, which was why we didn't really see him at all in this game. I mean, who's to say he might not have gotten some minutes at some point, but yeah, I mean, the solution for Kansas in this specific game that worked in the second half was Flory Badunga and Hunter Dickinson. The problem with that solution is that that's a Band-Aid. That is not a long-term fix for what KU may need, right? They're going to need AJ Storr. They're going to need a Rylan Griffin to step up and provide something, right? I mean, Zeke Mayo obviously has been, for all intents and purposes, a home run, basically, so far for KU. 27 points in this game for him against West Virginia, but yeah, man, it just wasn't enough, and this loss obviously very much stings. And I think, just real quick, bigger picture, but before we toss to a break, we'll keep this discussion going. Just real quick, big picture, for me at least, the path to Kansas winning the Big 12 title in the regular season was going undefeated and at home.
Yeah.
And that obviously has not happened. And now you're starting to look at, okay, well, you're going to Iowa State. You're going to go at Houston, right? You're going to go at Baylor later in the season. Like, some of those games where it was like, okay, well, it's fine if you lose, whatever. Now you probably need to find a way to win a couple more of those because of this loss, and if you lose any more games at home. So, I don't know. That's the other alarming part of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And to your point, this is the only time you play West Virginia this year. And, not a knock on West Virginia. I think West Virginia actually has a chance to be pretty solid, especially when they're at full strength. And not to get too into the weeds because we are going to go to a break, but I do think that the other contenders, some of them are going to find a way to get a win against West Virginia, whether that's in Morgantown, whether that's, at home. And so basically you just gave up a game in the race from that standpoint too. That's not to say you can't make it up, right? Like, we're one game in, but at the same time, you're putting yourself already in a spot where it's like, well, hey, if Iowa State beats West Virginia, then that's a game you just lost to Iowa State.
We're going to keep this conversation going, unfortunately, to the break. After the break, we're going to talk about home field apparel, though. You can shop home field apparel at homefieldapparel.com. You can use the promo code PAID24, 15% off your first order. They've got over 40-plus Kansas items. They've got over 140 other schools you can shop at homefieldapparel.com. So, look, if you're feeling down and you don't want to wear your Kansas Jayhawks home field apparel proudly, you can wear any other apparel. Like me, I decided to throw on the Ball State shirt to represent Ball State instead of Kansas after the loss. So you can shop Kansas, you can shop any other school. Still time over the holidays, maybe to get a gift for yourself or for someone else in your family as we approach New Year's. Once again, that's homefieldapparel.com with the promo code PAID24. More Kansas basketball talk is coming up next.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your number one source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
This is the PAID Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Nick Springer. I'm here with Kevin Flaherty. We're brought to you by Emprise Bank, your partner in all things possible. Member FDIC. Don't forget, if you're watching us on YouTube at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN, you can subscribe to the channel. You can like the show. You can drop a comment to share your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns about where Kansas basketball is at after they lose their opening conference game in Big 12 play against West Virginia 62-61. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review and subscribe wherever you get your audio podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you may listen. So lots of ways to get the show, lots of ways to listen and watch the show. So thank you, everyone that continues to listen with us and help us grow the channel here as well, covering all things KU. One other thing, Kevin, is this was the return of Joe Yesufu. And, of course, in a classic Kansas fashion, the return of a player formerly on Kansas means that they must have a big moment in the game. And Joe Yesufu, sure enough, hits a three from the right wing late in the second half that helped put West Virginia. I think KU would cut the lead to 4, and then Yesufu hits a 3 to make it back to 7 with about 4 minutes to go or something like that. So that was another thing in there. You think about, there's a long list now of former Kansas Jayhawks who come back to play Kansas and have big games, as it turns out. But yeah, obviously a very frustrating loss for KU. The bright spots, we kind of already talked about it, but Flory Badunga, I mean, outstanding. Truly looks like a star in the making. Picking up a guard and guarding him 94 feet was awesome.
That was hysterical and awesome, and he actually did a really good job of it.
Yeah, he is outstanding. He's going to be really fun to watch, and he is a guy that has openly stated that he wants to be more of a developmental type guy for a couple of years, and so I am truly just salivating at the thought of Flory Badunga in 2-3 years or so about what he can possibly be for Kansas on the interior, or thinking about him playing with Darren Peterson coming up next season as well. So big bright spot there was Floyd Badunga. Ends up playing, I think, 18 minutes in the game, was really impactful in the second half. Obviously was sort of the catalyst for KU making that comeback in the second half. He finished the game with 8 points, 4-4 from the floor. He had 11 rebounds as well. He was outstanding. You mentioned Hunter Dickinson. Obviously, it was a pretty slow start for him. Thought he played better in the second half and got things going a little bit more in the second half. DeJuan Harris finished with 11 points. And then obviously, to me, the headline of the game positively for Kansas, Zeke Mayo continues to be the closer, the opener, all of the above, the guy that is really the spark for this offense on the perimeter for Kansas, right? And you think about having a guy like that and also having a guy like Hunter Dickinson on the interior, that still gives me hope that this Kansas offense can be really explosive, can be a really dynamic offense when you have somebody like that on the outside. And with Zeke Mayo, who once again proved that I think he is without question KU's basically 1B offensive option, I guess. You want to call Hunter Dickinson 1A, Zeke Mayo 1B at this point with what he can do. So that was a really big positive for Kansas from him. 27 points in the game. Obviously hits the clutch 3 to tie it late as well. Hit a couple of the shots also. So, yeah, Zeke Mayo, again, really, really strong performance of him. And certainly it seems like Kansas will need more of that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, even when he misses a shot, right, it falls right to Kansas for an offensive rebound. Yeah, but I really liked the look that they were able to run for him after he had made the 3. And then, Kansas is down 3, you run the back cut, and he winds up getting the and one on that thing. And I think the way that he's moving without the ball as well, Nick, makes it more feasible that this could kind of be who, I'm not saying he's going to score 27 points a game, but I think you can count on him to be, one of your primary guys at this point, because I think he's found that nice balance, right? Coming in from South Dakota State, he was a guy that had the ball in his hands when he was scoring. And a lot of guys struggle to adjust to, how am I going to score when I'm not the guy who's bringing the ball down the court and having it in my hands? A guy that was a little bit like that actually was Malik Newman, was a guy who was a high school point guard, played point guard at Mississippi State, even sat out a year as a transfer. And really, you go over the course of that year, he was kind of wondering where the points were coming from, and then all of a sudden he became the best player in the history of college basketball.
And wait a minute. Did you say that he had to sit out a year as a transfer? They used to do that? What?
To sit back a year. I know I've got my cane over here and my plastic covered sofa over there, and I've got a thing of Werther's Originals over here, but yeah, in fact, transfers did have to sit out a year. But no, I do think that Zeke Mayo is a really positive development. I also think, too, Zeke is showing maybe a little bit more defensively than I thought he would have by this point, and the effort level has been there good defensively. Another thing that I know he's pretty widely panned, Nick, I thought DeJuan Harris had some good moments in the comeback as well. He's a guy that we've talked about on the show. I think DeJuan's a guy that you almost notice more when he's off the court, because you're like, man, we just had 3 or 4 possessions and didn't get a good shot at all. He really attacked the basket when they needed him to. He hit a big 3. And so I think DeJuan Harris and Zeke Mayo can work as a backcourt. I think that's something that you can continue to move forward and build around. Obviously, you want to build around Hunter Dickinson at the 5, especially if he's playing more like he did in the second half than he did in the first half. It's those couple other spots, and that's what's going to drive people nuts is, hey, how do you solve this? I wonder, too, once Big 12 teams see the tape of Flory and Hunter Dickinson, whether you'll have different ways to kind of attack that duo. I know you're familiar in KU's second year under Lance Leipold when they played West Virginia. They hadn't really shown a ton of option to that point. And they brought out the option, and West Virginia's defensive coordinator after the game was like, what do you want me to do? When we prepared for these guys, they hadn't shown that. They hadn't really shown that at all. Much less, have it to where they're going to come out and they're going to base out of that. I think there was probably a little bit of that with the Flory and Hunter pairing, where it was, hey, West Virginia probably prepared for plans A, B, and C. They did not probably prepare for, we are going to get a long stretch of Flory Badunga and Hunter Dickinson. But I think one of the things that's interesting about it is I do think that obviously you have similar issues in terms of Flory's not going to knock down jump shots, and so your spacing is still constricted. But Flory competes at such a high level on the offensive glass that I think you can basically say that part to whether it's KJ Adams, whether it's AJ Storr, hey, if you're in there, we can count on you to provide more spacing than Flory does, either KJ with his ball handling, AJ Storr with the shooting, but you have to be a presence on the offensive glass like that if you're going to help us out.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the biggest inconsistency once again for Kansas kind of falls to that 3-4 spot, right? Like, you feel pretty good, I think, at this point about Zeke Mayo and DeJuan Harris. Obviously, you got Hunter Dickinson. You brought in AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin, and those guys just haven't stepped up yet. You know, KJ Adams, I think, is, like we talked about earlier in the show, was somebody that can be effective at times, but maybe has kind of teams recognize what his strengths and weaknesses are and can easily capitalize on that on really kind of both ends of the floor, to be honest. And so now you've run into this issue where, what do you do with those spots? And, obviously Zeke Mayo has been really, really good, but you think about the issues that Kansas has had over the past couple of years in this era of the transfer portal. And I keep coming back to this idea that we've talked about it before. Bill Self and his best quality is developing players, right? Having guys come in and develop under him for a couple of years. That's been proven, I think, to be his best quality over the course of his tenure in Kansas, is that he can take guys over time and really develop them into high-level players. The issue with the transfer portal is that you are getting guys that are in some ways already finished products. They are already developed players. And then you bring them into the system, and Bill Self, I think in some cases, is basically trying to reinvent the wheel with those guys, in the sense of he's trying to tear them down to build them back up the way he wants to in an extremely, extremely truncated time span, because these guys are getting to campus basically in May or June, right? Or even later in some cases. And it's not working for certain individuals, right? I think that's really the issue, is that you've just got this real butting of heads of a player who is fully developed, who is a mature player, for better or worse, right? His strengths and weaknesses, whatever it may be, like, he is a developed player. And then you try to remold that, and it's just not really working, and it hasn't really worked. I mean, you think about some of the other transfers that Kansas had before this year where it didn't really work out. So I don't know. I don't know where that conversation goes. I don't know if it's, hey, if you're Bill Self, you need to be more prudent in who you decide to look for in the transfer portal in terms of guys that, actually fit into what you want to do, versus trying to take a guy and say, hey, I can, in the span of 3 months, I can mold him into the player I want him to be, because that obviously I don't think has worked for a couple of guys. And like, now you're to the point here, Kevin, also where I don't really have a lot of hope for AJ Storr or Rylan Griffin to get exponentially better, because you have now entered into conference play where from now until the end of February, you're going to be playing 2 games a week, virtually every week, against high-level opponents week in and week out. Your window of opportunity to really change or really fit into what Bill Self wants you to do, if you're those transfers, it's just closed. It was open there over this winter break time period where you only had 3 games with a span of like 17 days. That window is closed, right? You're not going to have time to sort of look at the big picture and really change anything, right? Because you're playing 2 games a week against really high-level opponents. Oh, and by the way, you're Kansas, so you're going to get everyone's best shot game in and game out. So there is no more time for you to try to tinker with different things and try to fit in however you want to be. So that's really my biggest concern. Like, sitting here now on New Year's Eve going into 2025, like, I just don't have a lot of hope for those guys to get exponentially better, because that window for them to do so, I think, has kind of come and gone.
Yeah, I don't know if it's come and gone. Like I agree with you that the ideal period is already passed, but obviously we've seen some guys get it later in the process. We just talked about Malik Newman. Silvio as a freshman was a guy like that. Remy Martin was a guy that had his issues with self. Things weren't clicking. Had the injury, and then oh my gosh, he appears and makes all these clutch shots. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen with these guys. I do think the window is maybe a little, I don't know that it's closed. I think it's been shut, there's not as much of an opportunity there. I do think the immediacy, people are going to want sweeping changes. And I think that that's not really necessarily how it typically works, right? You're going to have to make changes maybe on an incremental basis where you look at it and you say, hey, how do we get AJ from 15 minutes to 20 minutes? Or how do you do this part? And maybe the small answer is when AJ has a bad play, I yell at him, but I leave him on the court and let him play through it a little more. And those are the little decisions that are going to maybe add up over the course of conference play. And really, I think, tell the tale on where this team winds up going. Because, Nick, I tweeted, nobody wants to hear this after a loss. And I 100% get it. There is a path here, I do think. I do think that there are some answers there. I think that for a lot of KU fans, the answer is as simple as, hey, put AJ Storr at the 4 and we'll be just fine. And that's not necessarily, what the case is, but I do think that there are answers on this roster that you can find. You're going to have to kind of shift your way of thinking, to your point about talking about KJ Adams. You are going to need to be introspective and look at it and say, okay, what can we do to get from where we're at here, where we have potential answers, to where they're here and they're hard and fast answers and they're things that we can count on. And I think that's going to be the difficult process from the actual game standpoint. I know we've been talking more big picture. The final play, I know a lot of people are kind of, some people thought KJ got fouled. Some people are like, why would you throw that to KJ? I have to think, Nick, in an ideal world, that throwing it to KJ made a lot of sense, but that you had to call timeout the second he has that ball, the split second, really, that he has the ball controlled. And the reason I say that is that when you're throwing that thing up for KJ, if you let it play out and you say, I'm not calling timeout here, this is the look that we want. The ideal look that you're talking about with him catching the ball up in the air, back to the basket, is you're hoping for a Christian Laettner type turnaround from 16 or 18 feet. KJ's not the guy you want taking that shot. And so there needs to be an added component to that, whether that's KJ is jumping up, making the catch, and he's immediately, tossing it to a shooter who's coming forward, whether it's, hey, just catch it, we'll call timeout, and then we'll have an inbounds play to drop a shot for Zeke or Dickinson or whoever. There has to be another component versus we're going to win or lose this game based on an 18-foot turnaround from KJ Adams. And I think more than the foul, more than whatever else, I think that was my takeaway from that play, is something there didn't go right. Whether, for one reason or not, I can't think that, hey, that's the shot that we want right there to decide whether or not we win or lose this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, beyond that, you're talking about a coach in Bill Self who is one of the best in the business at drawing up inbounds plays, right? Like if you have 1 second on the clock, let's say it takes 0.8 of a second for KJ to catch the ball and somebody to call timeout. You have exactly 1 second left. I don't think there's anybody else in the country I'd want to be on the sideline trying to draw up a play to get a bucket in 1 second, right? I mean, how many times out of timeouts you see Bill Self come up with something perfect, that works. So absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if there was just a miscommunication. Somebody didn't know, maybe Hunter Dickinson didn't recognize KU had a timeout left, KJ, whatever it may be. You're absolutely right. Clearly there was some kind of breakdown
Well, I know
down over that.
I know Self said after the game, because he's having his press conference while we're on the show. Henry Greenstein over at the Lawrence Journal World does a fantastic job. Tweeted out basically that Self said that he did want them to throw it down and have sort of a one-on-one play for the catch. My question is just, what's the next part? Because I don't think that it's KJ shooting that shot. Maybe I'm wrong. I think maybe there needs to be a timeout after the catch, but apparently throwing the ball down to KJ Adams was the plan. I'm just thinking, hey, what's the next part of that plan, right? Like, and so it's funny, but it isn't. But like we talked about at the very start of the show, Nick, like, come out with fire and intensity and all of those things to start, and you're not in that final possession there. You maybe win this thing by 10 points.
Yeah, and exactly. Look, if you don't get down 15 in the first half and then 18 early in the second half, if you only get down, even if you just play a little bit better to where you're only down 10 or you're only down 12, then you're able to win in the second half going away. So, yeah, it has been unfortunate. Obviously, West Virginia was without their best player in DeVries, right? So, let's see.
Murray, who's a really good player, was a personal favorite of mine on the EYBL circuit, because was one of those guys that, like, every single game somebody was trying to fist fight him because he was got them really, really, really mad at him. But no, they were without those guys. And I'm glad you mentioned that real quick, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, because one of the things that I was going to say heading into break is people are going to point that they were without those guys. A lot of times, Nick, what we've seen and what you see statistically is teams can brave losses like that for a game or whatever. It's not a big deal. Like, if Hunter Dickinson misses most of the second half against Duke, like, there's a chance that somebody steps up, and it's actually a fairly good thing. The thing that we see statistically is usually, okay, now you played 10 games without Hunter Dickinson. Where are you at? And people adjust to seeing how you're going to handle all of those things. And, credit to West Virginia. I mean, I do think Kansas could have done a lot better in this one, but West Virginia still had to go out and win this game, and the Mountaineers did.
Kansas did do one thing better that they had talked about, and that was get to the free throw line in the second half, especially. That was part of their comeback. Zeke Mayo goes 13 of 13 from the line. Kansas as a team ends up going 19 of 21. By the way, West Virginia only attempted 6 free throws in the game, so they drastically outnumbered them there. But the three-point shooting, again, collectively as a team, not great. Zeke Mayo actually ends up going 2 of 7, which is percentage-wise well below what you'd expect from him. But he didn't really get anything else. Hunter Dickinson had a 3 early in the game. AJ Storr had one that he missed. Riley Griffin ends up going 1 of 3. So 4 of 16 in total from 3 for Kansas. Something else that maybe you could keep in mind as well. And look, Riley Griffin, just really quick, he only ends up playing 12 minutes, Kevin. And it kind of felt like with Riley Griffin, he has resorted to, okay, I know I'm going to get pulled if I mess anything up, so let me just get my shots up while I can. And he ends up just throwing up 3 threes basically as soon as he got the ball 3 times. So I don't know. That's a little concerning, I guess, too, that's maybe the possible mindset you might have if you're him. Shaquille Moore played only 2 minutes in the first half. Didn't get to see anything of him again through the rest of the game. So overall, this is certainly a stunning loss. Mentioned it, Kansas hadn't lost at home to open conference play and God knows how long. And this one really stinks, right? Because, for the second straight year, you're Kansas, you are a preseason number 1 team. You have some high highs in non-con, right? Beating North Carolina, beating Duke. And then you have some low lows against Creighton and Missouri. And you feel like, okay, you came out of it all right. You righted the ship at the end of conference play or non-conference play with a couple of wins. And then you lay an egg in the first half against West Virginia, and you can't dig yourself out of it. And again, it's no rest for the weary because you're going to be entering into this gauntlet of a schedule. These next 2 games for Kansas, Kevin, are not, on paper, I guess, should not overly be difficult at UCF and Arizona State. Obviously, the last time Kansas went to UCF, they lost. So So I guess that's something to be alarmed by. But to me, you absolutely have to win these next two because, again, the big week, you can kind of look at this conference schedule for Kansas and look at sort of like what I would call like big weeks, right? And your big week is coming up very quickly, January 11th to January 18th, where on the 11th, which is a Saturday, you go at Cincinnati. Then in the midweek, you go at Iowa State, and then you play K-State at home on January 18th, right? That's a big week. That's where we'll probably learn quite a bit more about where Kansas is at, if they are legitimate conference title contenders. Because with this loss against West Virginia, now all of a sudden you go into that thinking, man, you definitely need to win. Well, I wouldn't say definitely, but you probably need to win one of those road games at Cincinnati or at Iowa State, I think, at this point. Whereas before, maybe you could stomach losing both, but now I don't really know.
Yep. Yeah, by the way, you talking about the UCF thing, I didn't know if you saw they won in Lubbock today.
Oh, wow. I had not seen that, actually.
So, and UCF actually beat Texas A&M, which is a ranked team, earlier this year. So, that's one they better show up for as well. And I think when you look at this Kansas, you hate to say, hey, it's all about the effort or whatever else. I think maybe the way that I would put it, that I feel like is maybe more accurate, is it's about the focus, Nick. And yes, the intensity and effort goes with that, but also there are sometimes that Kansas plays hard, but it doesn't get good shots, or doesn't play with the level of requisite focus that you're going to need to play with. And so I think the next couple games could be really huge for Kansas to see, hey, you come off this loss and regain your focus and head into that tough stretch as the best possible team you could be? Or is it a situation where you look at it and say, oh, it's UCF, like we'll get it together, and wind up putting yourself behind the eight ball again?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is going to be an unforgiving conference schedule for Kansas. They're playing 20 games, which is going to make it even that much more unforgiving. And like I mentioned earlier, the bottom line is you're Kansas. You're going to get everyone's best shot. You sign up for that when you come to KU, and that's how it's going to be. And the question is, can this team rise up to that now? Rise up to that, because this loss has the potential to really derail things early on, right? And obviously that is not where Kansas is expected to be. Bill Self said it himself in the postgame. This is not the team they thought they would be on January 1st. And what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You got to turn things around quick.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. And our friend of the show, Derek Johnson, looked at AJ Storr being a -14 today and said, hey, what if there isn't an answer? And
that's what I mean. Like,
I think there probably are, but at the same time, I don't think maybe it's as cut and dry as everybody's trying to make it out to be.
I agree with that, but
where it's just like, Bill Self should be seeing this. Why is he not? Why am I the only one who's seeing this? I'm not sure there is right answer right now, but I still think you made a great point where introspection is still needed, and you need to basically say, hey, what is the way out of this? And there are going to probably need to be some changes to get there.
Yeah, look, when I was talking earlier, like, I've lost faith. When I say I've lost faith in AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin getting exponentially better, I mean, I'm saying I've lost faith in them being like, 15-point per game guys. I think AJ Storr and Rylan Griffin could still get better over the course of the season and could get to a point where they are contributing. It's just that, to me, the ceiling of this team that we talked about, back in October has been lowered, right? And that's not to say that they still can't go out and even win a national championship. I think that's still a possibility. But the ceiling, I think, to me, unequivocally has been lowered. And I don't think there's enough time left for those guys to raise it to what we thought it could have been at the start of the year. So I don't know. Time will tell. But yeah, I also would like to acknowledge what you said as well, that this problem is not as simple as take KJ Adams out and everything's hunky-dory. There is clearly much more to the issues right now that Kansas is dealing with, that, changing one guy is not going to turn this team into a national championship team. So,
by the way, plus minus, obviously not everything. Diggy Coit, the best plus minus today at plus 12.
Diggy Coit continues to be a beacon of hope for all short kings in the world, Kevin. He continues to be a beacon of hope for short kings around the world that you can do it, right? I mean, that dude, listen, I don't care what KU's website says. He is like 5'8", maybe. And he is still out there doing it at the D1 level. So, yeah, shout out to Diggy Coit as well. So, Kevin, you got anything else you want to add here before we wrap up this therapy session?
No. Hopefully the next show is a little bit more positively inclined.
Yeah, for sure. Which, by the way, we talked about it. They're going to be going at UCF. That's coming up on Sunday. So this is one of the situations where they are actually going to have a little bit more time between games than what they will have typically in conference play. So this is, I guess, your one opportunity maybe to have a little bit more time, I guess. So we'll see how Kansas comes out and responds on the road in Orlando on Sunday. So until then, we'll probably have another show as well, talking more KU football, roundup in the transfer portal. Kansas did land another wide receiver commitment in Bryson Canty that we'll probably talk about later on this week as well. So be on the lookout for that as Kansas continues to be busy in the transfer portal. And, of course, be sure to follow along with us all throughout the rest of the spring for KU basketball and plenty of KU football updates. And then, look, I know the season just ended, but we're 2 months away from spring ball. Kevin, how about that? Positive vibes. So keep that in mind. But as always, if you're joining us on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel at Kansas Jayhawks KCSN. You can drop us a like, drop a comment on the show to share your thoughts on the show as well. And if you're listening on the audio platforms, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to tell your friends and family about us as well to help grow the show. And until then, I think that wraps it up here for Kevin Flaherty. I'm Nick Springer. We'll talk to you again soon. See ya.